Hello, the internet. Let's talk about a video that I'm sure is going to be super great for my personal life. Today, we're primarily going to be focusing on the question: do American Christians have a religious or spiritual duty? Are they commanded by God to help the current modern nation state of Israel, or even perhaps the current people of Israel, the Israelis, the Jews, right? That's the big propaganda. We have to help Israel. We have to help the Jews because the Lord will bless those that do and he will curse those that curse them. Is that true, or is that propaganda? And then we will also touch on some related topics. All right, so first we're going to start off with theology. As you already know, I'm sure, if you've been pondering this question or aware of it, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, works in a series of covenants, right? Promises, legal binding contracts, if you will, but in the spiritual realm. Okay, so here we have Genesis 12, 1 through 4. I'm going to focus specifically on 3. This is God talking to Abraham. He says, I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse those who curse you. And through you, I will bless all nations. All right, so this is the verse that everybody uses to say, okay, well, Abraham, the children of Abraham, that's Israel. If you bless Israel, the Lord will bless you. If you curse Israel, the Lord will curse you. All right, and through Israel, he will bless all nations. However, this is the original and the oldest covenant that God has, right? This goes all the way back to the main daddy man, Abraham, Father Abraham. Okay, so many things have happened since then. Here we have in Exodus 19, 3 through 7, we now have the Moses covenant. Okay, so this is talking about like when he went up to get the 10 Commandments. All right. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then you, of all nations, will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. All right, Moses went down and said, hey, we have to obey all these rules, the 10 Commandments, and then several other chapters of rules, right? Exodus chapters 20 through 23 is all the laws that must be kept. And then here is the borders of Israel that is promised to them as long as they are keeping these laws, right? I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea and from the desert to the Euphrates River. Okay, so under the covenant of Moses, they have to be keeping all the laws from Exodus chapters 20 to 23, all right? And in return for doing that, what we can see that proves they're doing that is they will have the land of Israel established from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea and from the desert to the Euphrates River. Okay, so they don't have that land, and they are not following any of these laws. Therefore, they are not in the covenant with Moses. All right. Now we're talking about the new covenant. Christ comes, he dies and pays the price for our sins and all that fun jazz, right? And creates a new covenant to replace the old. All right, so this new covenant is based on faith and grace, not law. You see how this previous covenant was based on law? Where does it say? If you obey me fully and keep my covenant, right? So this covenant was predicated on the obedience of law. This one is not. Hebrews 8, 3 through 7, specifically verse 6. But in fact, the ministry Jesus has received is as superior to theirs as the covenant of which he is mediator is superior to the old one, since the new covenant is established on better promises. All right, so the new covenant is superior. It's better than the old one, and it establishes a better situation, right? Romans 6:11 through 18, specifically verse 14 here. For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under grace, right? You are not under the law, but under grace. We're not under the old covenant anymore. We're under the new covenant. Ephesians 2:3 through 10, specifically verse 8 and 9. For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Again, reiterating, it's not by obedience to law or any dutiful works. It's by grace alone that the new covenant operates. All right, the new covenant applies to everybody. It's no longer just for the Jews. It is for the Gentiles as well, right? This is another big change from the old covenant to the new covenant. Therefore, remember that formerly you who are Gentiles by birth are called uncircumcised by those who call themselves the circumcision, which is done by the human hands. Remember that at the time you were separated from Christ, excluded from citizenship in Israel and foreigners to the covenant of the promise, without any hope and without God in the world. But now, in Christ Jesus, you who once were far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ. Okay, so it's saying all this stuff that they were doing, circumcising themselves and all this other nonsense, was works by hands. We're not under that covenant anymore. And that means now this is opened up to the Gentiles, not just the Jews. Consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people. Fellow citizens with God's people, and also members of his household. All right, so Gentiles are now, if they are Christians, a part of the chosen people. They are fellow citizens with God's people. God's people has transitioned from the ethnic group of the Israelis following the law of Judaism, and now it has transitioned to the new covenant under grace with acceptance through Christ, and it applies to everybody. So Christians are now God's new chosen people. They are fellow citizens with God's people. All right. So we can see that Christ came down, theologically speaking, to correct the old covenant, because even though the old covenant had had several readaptations, right? There was one under Noah as well that we kind of skipped over. It had had several adaptations and revisions. The Israelites continued to fail and continued to fail. So now Jesus comes to create a new covenant that corrects all of that. All right, so Christianity was not meant to coexist with Judaism. It was meant to correct and replace it, right? And we see that after Judaism is destroyed or corrected or revised, right? However you want to look at it, spiritually, it is also destroyed physically. The Jewish-Roman Wars were a series of large-scale revolts by the Jews of Judea against the Roman Empire between 66 and 135 CE. Okay? We see here, you can read all these things happened. The first Jewish-Roman war ended with the devastating siege and destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, including the burning of the Second Temple. All right, so this is the destruction of the Second Temple. The Romans' brutal suppression of this uprising led to the near total depopulation of Judea through a combination of battlefield casualties, mass killings, and widespread enslavement of survivors, driving profound religious, cultural transformations that would shape Judaism for millennia. With the temple sacrificial cult no longer viable, other forms of worship developed. These developments laid the foundation for Rabbinic Judaism, which emerged as the dominant form of Judaism in the late antiquity as a response to the codification of the Mishnah and the Talmud. All right. So let's back up just a little bit and talk about this. So, Christ comes, fixes a spiritual covenant, creates a new one. does away with the old law. It's replaced by grace and faith. The physical manifestation of that is that the Jewish temple is destroyed. This is the physical sign. You don't have an option to obey the old covenant because now there is a new one. That is the path forward. However, Jews being stubborn, the Israelites being stubborn, as they do if you know the Old Testament over and over again, they refuse to accept the way of God, the way of Yahweh, and they just go on their own path, right? So they're pretty much wiped out, which is another point we'll get into in a second. Pretty much eradicated. The handful of survivors that do exist largely consolidate in Babylon, and they create the Talmud and rabbinic Judaism, right? So they're no longer keeping the old covenant. Now they're just doing a new form of scholarly and legalistic spirituality, okay? Legalism. So let's see what Jesus talked about legalism. Now, Jesus wasn't speaking about rabbinic Judaism and the Talmud because it didn't exist yet. But the Jewish people already had this legalistic inclination, right? Luke 11, especially the later parts of it, 37 through 53, is largely about this. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees, clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness." 46, Jesus replied, "And you experts in the law, woe to you, because you laid people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. Woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your ancestors who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs." Okay, so these first few highlights that we had here, we're talking about how, they understand the letter of the law and they follow the letter of the law, but the desires within their hearts are still impure, right? They do the right thing, they say the right thing, they wear the right clothes, they eat the right foods, but they don't feel the way that they're supposed to feel. All right, this reference here, that the ongoing tribal wars between Israel and Judea, the northern and southern tribes, Judea being the more spiritually connected to Yahweh, and Israel being the more legalistic. Ultimately, Israel was the surviving tribe sect of the two. And so this is another indicator that the nation of Israel that we see today is not in spiritual alignment with God or Yahweh, right? Because it's not referring to the old Judea, but Israel, and we see Christ making reference to this here, right? Your ancestors killed the prophets, but now you make tombs for them and act like it's all good. Right? Snakes. Woe to you experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. Right? So they say, you hold back the knowledge that others need to enter the kingdom, even though you yourself have not entered it, right? You are gatekeeping something you have no right to gatekeep, that should not even be gatekept in the first place. All right. So that should solidify that after Christ's death and after the destruction of the second temple, rather than turning to the grace and the faith and, for lack of a better way to put it in the postmodern times, the vibes of Christianity, right? Loving thy neighbor and all of that jazz, they chose to double down on scholarly legalism for their spirituality when they created the Talmud and rabbinic Judaism. All right, so the Talmud. This is from Wikipedia, boys and girls. The Talmud is the primary source of Jewish religious law and Jewish theology. In nearly all Jewish communities, the Talmud was the centerpiece of Jewish cultural life, and was foundational to all Jewish thoughts and aspirations, serving also as the guide for daily life of the Jews. All right, guys, you heard it here first. Heard it here first from Wikipedia, right? I know Wikipedia is not always 100% truthful and all that. My point is, it's This isn't some crazy, like, you know, National Socialist Party website or something, right? We're just on Wikipedia here, boys and girls. The language of the Talmud is the Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, right? So the language that the Talmud is written in is that of Babylonian Aramaic. The Talmudic tradition emerged and was compiled between the destruction of the Second Temple and the Arab conquest in the early 7th century. The word Talmud commonly refers to the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is the more extensive of the two and is considered the more important. Okay, again, from the mouth of the beast, they care about the words, Jews' daily life, and Jewish cultural principles were founded on the scholarly legalism that was written while the Jewish exiles were in Babylon after the destruction of the Second Temple, when they were refusing to follow the Old or the New Covenant. Right? So it's the classic worshiping of the calf. And that is what carried over into postmodern Judaism, right? So that's how off the beaten path they are. So if you think, right, you think that we're still operating under this first covenant, which we're not anymore. And this isn't even talking about, it's not the same. They're not the same anymore. They're not following the law. Therefore, the blessings don't go to them, right? If they are not the people of Yahweh, his special people, because they're not following their covenant, then you don't have the ability to help his people. Currently, there are no people. Well, actually, because we're under the new covenant, Christians are the new body, right? We are the new body. The body of Christ is the new chosen people. It's pretty late, and I'm getting a little ranty, but hopefully that makes sense. All right. Cool. All right, so here's some quotes from the Talmud just to drive home that what's going on in there. Onkelos went and raised Jesus of the Nazareth from the grave through necromancy. What is the punishment of that man? A euphemism for Jesus himself in the next world. Jesus said to him, he is punished with boiling excrement. Jesus went and stood up a brick and worshipped it as an idol. He caused the masses to sin. Jesus, the Nazarene, performed sorcery, and he incited the masses and subverted the masses and caused the Jewish people to sin. So we see these post-Jesus Babylonian Jews are pretty not a fan of Jesus Christo. On Passover Eve, they hung the corpse of Jesus in Nazarene after they killed him by way of the stoning, because he practiced sorcery, inciting people to idol worship, and led the Jewish people astray. All right. So, this brings us to a next phase of our Jewish people discussion in their Jewish history, right? So we have the Old Covenant. It's concluded. Jesus comes, creates a new covenant. That's the path forward. Rome physically destroys Jerusalem, the temple, and the Jewish people, preventing anybody from being confused right now. You can't follow the Old Covenant. Your only choice is to follow the New Covenant. The Jews still refuse. They are scattered. They start to follow a false, legalistic, foreign-influenced religion. And then these new group of people come on the scene, the Ashkenazi Jews. They traditionally speak Yiddish, a language originated in the 9th century. Okay, so that date's important. The Ashkenazi adapted their traditions to European and underwent transformation of their interpretation of Judaism in the late 18th and 19th centuries. Right. All right. So we're shifting away from what is already the perverse rabbinic Judaism. So, the Ashkenazi Jews, TLDR, right, here we go. Genetic studies indicate that Ashkenazis have both Levantine and European, mainly Southern and Eastern European ancestries, with some focusing on the European genetic origin in Ashkenazi maternal lineage, contrasting with the predominantly Middle Eastern genetic origin of the paternal lineage. Okay, so what happened is these Jewish desperates traveled into Eastern Europe and took for themselves a bunch of Eastern European wives. On top of that, many times large groups of Eastern Europeans converted to Judaism for political reasons to avoid the wars between Islam and Christianity, right? If they could claim that they were Jewish, they kind of wouldn't have to participate in that. So, through all of that, the Ashkenazi bloodline has, at a minimum, been highly polluted, if you want to call it that, highly diluted with, that's a better word, highly diluted with Eastern European blood, Slavic blood. Okay, so again, if you want to think that all this, the covenant from Yahweh and all this is based on bloodlines and ethnicities and all this, well, the majority of the modern Jewish people aren't even majority of that ethnicity, right? And we see that Ashkenazi Jews were estimated to be 3% of the population in the 11th century, right? So a tiny population, rising all the way up to 92% in 1930 at the population's peak. It is assumed that the Ashkenazi comprised 65 to 70% of Jews worldwide in 2000, while other estimates suggest more than 75%. All right, so most of the Jews today, the healthy majority, are Ashkenazi, and the majority of Ashkenazi blood is not that of traditional, original ethnic Jews, Levantine people. All right. Here we just have this is a famous story, and a lot of these stuff, people take it serious both ways. Like, some people think that this was the one and done, all Ashkenazi Jews come from this, and there's other people that say, oh, we've debunked, this didn't even ever happen. I think the truth lies in the middle, and this isn't the only tale of something like this happening, right? The Khazars were a prominent Turkish people who established a powerful empire in the region between the Black Caspian Seas during the early medieval period. They converted to Judaism in the 9th century. It's crazy because Yiddish was spoken in the 9th century. Right? They did this to avoid war, blah, 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 between Christianity and Islam. And as this tale goes, it was a big deal. And that's where all the Ashkenazi Jews come from. All right. We can also just look here. Here's an Ashkenazi Jew. Here's people ethnically from the Levantine that still are there today and have been there for forever. All right. These are not the same ethnic group of people. Okay. It's pretty clear. All right. So, I think it's safe, hopefully, that I've established at this point that the modern nation-state of Israel, predominantly occupied by Ashkenazi Jews, is not under the covenant, right? Because we're operating under the new covenant of Christianity. And even if you want to believe that you can do the old covenant as well, they're not doing the old covenant. And even if you want to believe that it's the bloodline that matters, well, they're not the same bloodline. Okay, so the Israel nation is not practicing correctly. They could not practice correctly. They're not occupying the correct borders. They're not occupied by the correct ethnicity of people, and they're not practicing the correct things legally to qualify, even if they could, for that covenant with God to receive our blessings if we were to bless the nation state of Israel. All right, so go ahead and do yourself some theological thinking about that. Now, let's ponder. If that is true, so obvious that we can explain it in 15 minutes or so on a YouTube video, why is it that we think that, right? How do we have all this influence? Let's start to talk about some of the ways, objectively, factually, that the Jewish population, the Ashkenazi Jew specifically, has had an effect on Western culture for quite a while now. First and foremost, banking. The Talmud explains ultimately in many places, here's just one example here, that you cannot loan to other Hebrews, other Jews, with interest, but it is encouraged or allowed, whatever context you want to put on it, to loan to Gentiles on interest. Okay, so this is a big reason why Jews became banking, because it's literally outlined in the Talmud, right? But one may accept a guaranteed investment from Gentiles, as there is no prohibition of interest in transactions with them, and one may borrow money from them, and one may lend money to them with interest. All right, in the Bava Metzah 70b. Okay, let's talk about the Rothschild, an Ashkenazi Jewish noble banking family. This is Wikipedia again, boys and girls, Wikipedia. The family rose to prominence with Mayer Amschchild in 1744 through 1812, who established his banking business in the 1760s. Rothschild managed to bequeath his wealth and establish an international banking family through his 5 sons, who established businesses in Paris, Frankfurt, London, Vienna, and Naples. During the 19th century, the Rothschild family possessed the largest private fortune in the world as well as in modern history. Mayer Amsch Rothschild, let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes its laws. Another essential part of Mayer Rothschild's strategy for success was to keep control of the banks in the family hands, allowing them to maintain full secrecy about the size of their fortunes. The practice initiated by Rothschilds of having several brothers to form established branches in different financial centers was followed by other Jewish financiers like the Bischofams, the Pieris, the Selagamis, and the Lazards. And others. Financiers obtained an increasing share of international finance during the middle and last quarter of the 19th century. The head of the whole group was the Rothschilds family. Okay, so everyone that's like, whenever you tell someone that the Jews run the banks, I'm like, wait, the Jews run the banks? Really? Really? Yeah, really. Wikipedia right here says that Ashkenazi Jews created and established and maintain the modern banking system. Yes, really. For real, dog. Check it out on Wikipedia. All right, here's just some quick, interesting facts I thought you guys might want to know. As of 2025, the countries without a central bank include North Korea, Cuba, and Iran. The big bad guys. They're the ones that don't have Ashkenazi-controlled central banks. Countries that are not part of the SWIFT network typically include those under international sanctions and embargoes, such as North Korea and Iran. SWIFT, or the Society for Worldwide International Interbank Financial Telecommunications, is a secure messaging network used by banks and financial institutions to send and receive information about financial transactions, primarily for international money transfers. It does not handle or transfer funds directly, but facilitates communication between banks to ensure accurate and effective transactions. Right, the SWIFT system is how all the central banks communicate with each other. It's the Jew network for the Jew banks, if I may. As of 2025, the U.S. government owes approximately $4.63 trillion to the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank, central bank, not a federal institution, which is part of the total national debt. Okay, what's going over there in the UK? The UK government owes a significant portion of its national debt to the Bank of England, another private bank, not a government entity, primarily due to its quantitative easing program, which accounts for about a third of the total national debt. As recent estimates, the UK national debt is approximately $2.8 trillion. Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws. Mayer Amschel Rothschild. Beautiful, isn't it, boys and girls? So, I mean, this is just DuckDuckGo AI and Wikipedia. I'm not really going off the reservation too much here, am I, boys? All right, Balfour Declaration. This is the creation of the modern state of Israel. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1970 during the First World War, announcing its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, then Ottoman region with a small minority Jewish population. The declaration was contained in a letter dated 2 November 1917 from Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, to Lord Rothschild in the early 1900s, when they had the largest wealth of anybody that had ever happened before in recorded history, right? They were involved in the Balfour Declaration, which was the primary instrument in the beginning of the creation of Israel. Very interesting. Let's also now talk about the Schofield Reference Bible. Right. It was a widely circulated study Bible, edited and annotated by American Bible Study Cyrus I. Schofield. It popularized dispensationalism at the beginning of the 20th century, published by Oxford University Press and containing the entire text of the traditional Protestant King James Version. It first appeared in 1909, that same time period, and then was revised by the author in 1917. That same time period, when the Rothschilds owned it all, were running the show. Okay? Oh, must have not highlighted this. What's important about the Schofield Bible is it significantly influenced Christian Zionist movement because it argues that anti-Semitism is a sin, referring to Schofield's interpretation of Genesis 12:3 that we've already talked about. I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee. John Hagg, the founder of Christian United for Israel, argued that the main man or nation that lifts a voice or hand against Israel invites the wrath of God. So we can see there's a lot of arguments that the Rothschilds were the primary funders of the Schofield Bible as well. They were definitely involved in the Zionist movement, which was definitely involved in the writing and creation and manufacturing of the Schofield Bible, right? This is just Ashkenazi Jewish propaganda. This is what this is. They wanted a place called Israel, and they wanted Christians to think it was commanded for them to help them do that from God. That's what's going on here, boys. That's what's going on here. Let's talk about some other things. Let's talk about some other things that have been going on. Ghislaine Maxwell, she was found guilty for child sex trafficking and other offenses in connection with the deceased financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in 2021. Lovely lady. Born in France and raised in Oxford, she attended the Balliol College in Oxford in the late 1980s and became a prominent member in London's social scene. Maxwell worked for their father, Robert Maxwell, until his death in 1991. Robert Maxwell's death in 1991. She then, immediately following that, moved to New York City, where she continued living a socialite and had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Interesting. Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, after escaping Nazi occupation of his native country, Maxwell joined the Czechoslovakian army in exile during World War II, and he was decorated after active service in the British Army. Subsequent years, he worked in publishing, building up the Primogon Press, a major academic publisher, after 6 years as a Labour member in Parliament. During the 1960s, Maxwell again put all of his energy into business, successfully buying the British Printing Corporation, Mirror Group newspapers, and Malcolm Publishers. Okay, so right there, pause. This guy's a Jew. He's an Ashkenazi Jew, just to let you know. He's an Ashkenazi Jew, and he is highly involved in government, and he's highly involved in media, buying up all kinds of printing presses and publishers and newspapers, right? He led a crazy lifestyle. He had a daughter, Ghislaine. In 1991, his body was discovered floating in the Atlantic Ocean, having apparently fallen overboard from his yacht. He was buried in Jerusalem. Hey, where was he born? Ukraine. He was born in Ukraine. All right, so other things that he did. Maxwell is alleged to have distributed and bugged versions of software, PROMIS, to a plethora of national governments and global financial institutions that enable mass spying by the government of Israel. Maxwell allegedly employed John Tower, chairman of the United States Senate Committee on Armed Service, to facilitate the sales of bugged Israeli version of Pyramus to software in Sandra and Los Alamos. Los Alamos, where they be doing the UFO stuff. The Foreign Office suspected Maxwell of being a secret agent of a foreign government, possibly a double agent or a triple agent, and a thoroughly bad character and almost certainly financed by Russia. He had known links to British Secret Intelligence Service, M16, Soviet KGB, and Israel Intelligence Service, Mossad. Galloway referred to Maxwell as one of the worst criminals of the century. So this guy, this triple, double, quadruple agent who owned a bunch of media and was spying on UFO facilities for the Israeli government, had a daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, and as soon as he mysteriously died in 1991 by falling off his yacht, she went and had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, who was sex trafficking children for a bunch of politicians. And even though Epstein and Ghislaine have been convicted, we never found out who their clients were. And Kash Patel said he was going to help us out with that, but now he just mutters to himself when asked about it. And Elon Musk said Trump was on that list. And the next day apologized. And then the next day it was the LA riots. And then like 2 days later we bombed Iran. And they're Ashkenazi Jews working for Israel. Just, making sure we got the facts straight. All right. Cool. That's fun stuff. All right. So AIPAC, AIPAC, is America's pro-Israeli lobby. They closely monitor a broad range of issues that affect U.S.-Israeli relationship for the past 60 years, has built a reputation providing reliable, credible, and timely research and information for decision makers in Washington across the country. Right? So they provide information for decision makers as well. We tell your legislators what to think. Browse below to learn about our key issues: strengthening U.S.-Israeli relationships, supporting security assistance to Israeli, promoting peace, countering Iran's aggression and nuclear weapons, combating terrorism, opposing anti-Israeli discrimination. Man, you guys are really promoting peace here, huh? You got 4 aggressive policies, like peacefully. We peacefully want to beat the shit out of everybody. All right. We support 361 pro-Israeli Democratic and Republican candidates. 361. There are 535 voting members in Congress, which includes 100 senators and 435 representatives. And 361 of them are with the pro-Israel lobby group. That is healthily over half, boys and girls. All right, so just to make sure we got all of this in, now this is about a 40-minute long video. The new covenant ended the old covenant and was the fix to Judaism, meant to replace, not coexist with it. The Romans physically destroyed the Jews shortly after Jesus lived and died. Surviving Jews began to practice false religion. Many non-ethnic Jews converted for political reasons in the Middle Ages. Ashkenazi Jews established international banking in accordance with the Talmud and used that to control other nations. Mossad has ties to many blackmail programs that work against the West. And AIPAC is a lobby group that has heavy sway on the large majority of U.S. Congress members. Hopefully, you will consider some of these things and see that endlessly doing Israel's bidding isn't it. Hey, last point. Remember how Trump said he was going to deport everybody, but then he like kind of sort of primarily focused on deporting only people that were talking bad about Israel? That was really weird. All right, you guys have a good one. Peace.